Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update after the breaking news update of the premature ejection this morning, and we'll talk about that in a little while. This is the first major news update for the 8th of December 2025. We're going to look at hits and losses across the front line, look at what's been going on in the war. We have the crew of a Su-34 bomber dying in an ejection mishap inside a hangar. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about strikes that are taking place overnight. We don't have too much detail of Ukrainian strikes actually on Russia. A little bit about Russian strikes in Ukraine concerning particularly Sumy. We have what else we have to talk about? Quite a bit politically speaking, with regard to what's been going on and what continues to happen today with Zelensky meeting leaders in Europe. Quite a lot to discuss in that section towards the back end. Okay, before we get to the finer details, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. That really helps and hopefully helps yourself with keeping you up to date with what's going on in Ukraine. Let's get into the details. Okay, so we have the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveat supply, you can find them linked in the description below. And the figures have dropped considerably in the last 24 hours. Don't know whether has anything to do with that, whether the Russians aren't attacking so much. 810 personnel lost is a good at least 200 below what it was. We were at 1,200 odd earlier. Well, last week, actually, so maybe 3 days ago. Now we are down to 810, so that's a good 400 plus lower than it was. We have 47 vehicles and fuel tanks, where we have a pretty standard day. It used to be at about 100 plus. Now that's at 47, so that's much lower. 10 artillery systems is low comparative to what we are used to. 1 single armored combat vehicle, 2 tanks, low in those categories as well, and 3 pieces of special equipment. So could be seen as a quiet day. Of obviously drones listed there at 530, huge number there. The Russians have hit Ukraine on consecutive nights quite considerably, but actually even 530 is much more than last night and the night before put together. So a lot of activity during the days, as I often say. Now here we have Ukrainian defenders captured Russian infantry in the Pokrovsk direction, as according to this 1.5 minute video. During the movement of the occupiers towards the positions of the defense forces, the Russians tried to shell their own soldiers. They opened fire from artillery, mortars, and used FPV drones. And I don't know if that was a complete mistake or whether that was to do with the soldiers possibly surrendering. We have seen this countless times where Russian soldiers have surrendered. As you can see there, I think their arms are raised, and the Russians then try and strike their own soldiers, or if they are captured by Ukrainians, there might be a Ukrainian soldier behind them there. Might have been an attempt by the Russians to take out all of them. They do not like their own soldiers surrendering. So that is interesting, because in Pokrovsk, it looks like the Ukrainians are counterattacking to a point where they are taking prisoners. So there is still an element of the Ukrainians not being on pure defense there, but maybe some form of active defense. There were talks about Ukrainians clearing out areas of Pokrovsk, which shows that they are not just sort of operationally withdrawing there. So that's interesting. This was what I'm going to talk to you now is it's coming from a reporting from Ukraine video that the Euromaidan press often synopsize on their website. This was something I reported, I can't remember, maybe a week ago, where the Ukrainians took back Ivanivka. And then it turns out that they actually took quite a few prisoners as well as eliminating quite a few Russian soldiers there. Turns out it was quite a big deal in terms of the maneuvers that were involved here. So Euromaidan press reports that Ukrainian Marines recaptured Ivanivka in a combined arms assault after Russian troops attempting to establish a bridgehead across the Volcha River found themselves trapped in a kill zone. That's the image coming from reporting from Ukraine. The 37th Marine Brigade launched an operation under dense fog, which neutralized Russia's drone advantage. A Leopard 1A5 tank struck Russian positions from a concealed location with fiber optic drones, hunting soldiers one by one. Marines then descended from high ground overlooking the village and cleared enemy dugouts in close quarter combat. 53 Russian soldiers were killed. The remaining 19, recognizing that withdrawal across the river was impossible and no rescue was coming, surrendered. Ukrainian forces advanced 1.5 kilometers across a 5-kilometer front, pushing the Russians back behind the Volcha River. If Russia's command decides to assault the sector again, they will now face a reinforced Ukrainian defense holding the high ground and have to cross the river a second time. So good news there that the Ukrainians had some success in defending, counterattacking in the, more down towards Novopavlivka. This is south of, this is Novopavlivka is there. So this is south of the Pokrovsk sector. Okay, then we have just a typical video here. Just going to reference this, that you have quite a number of troops on the back of an unarmored vehicle getting struck by a drone, and that's going to be fairly common. So Ukraine's 3rd Separate Assault Battalion Fatum UAV unit hit a Russian military vehicle carrying infantry on the Liman front. They also hit several dugouts and firing positions. So typical sort of image, typical video there, but the transportation of troops, a fair number of troops in unarmored vehicles is nothing unusual, is it? Then we have a MiG-29 carrying an AASM-250 Hammer precision guided glide bomb, striking a Russian staging area in eastern Ukraine. Don't know exactly where, but this is the sort of thing you want to see if you are pro-Ukrainian. The use of guided glide bombs to precisely hit troop accumulations at staging points to stop assaults before they take place. And here you have a husk of a building remaining that has been completely taken out, maybe after several different strikes. That strike there, taking out the building in a significant way, but it does also look like the building to the left or that same building further here to the left has been completely destroyed, possibly in another strike or from shelling, I don't know. But anyway, good news there from the Ukrainian point of view. Now, sticking on the aviation subject, as I reported in my breaking news update, a Russian Su-34 crew died after the ejection system unexpectedly activated while the aircraft was parked in a shelter, according to Russian Aviation affiliated Channel fighter bomber. Both the pilot and navigator sustained fatal injuries in this premature ejection. A state commission is investigating the incident. Quote, yesterday in one of the bomber aviation regiments, the ejection system of an aircraft parked inside a shelter was activated. The pilot and navigator sustained injuries incompatible with life. What I want to do actually, while I have you here, I might as well read through one of the I had several responses to that breaking news update video, and many of you were talking about what would happen to the aircraft, and it seems to be fairly consistently claimed that the aircraft wouldn't last, would be in serious trouble. Like, just ejecting from a plane like that requires quite a lot of propulsion to get those ejector seats launched, and actually you're not going to have a sound plane thereafter. Matt Bishop says ejection seat explosive blow off of the canopy. Okay, I ended up down a rabbit hole of the K36DM seats design and weight. Guessing the pilot and navigator were 80 kilograms. You'd have 280 kilogram objects dropping down on the top of the plane, which is not designed for that. So it's not just about the ejection of the seats and how much the propulsion, because essentially you only eject from a plane when you're losing the plane. You've lost the plane. So I guess they don't really care about minimal damage to the plane from the ejection process, because you're losing the plane anyway. So there could be, pretty critical damage done to the cockpit from the ejection process, from the propulsion of these seats and whatever gas canisters or whatever it is going off and sending up these seats. But then if you're inside a hangar and those seats go up, then they're going to be coming down with basically a dead body on. So as Matt says, 180 kilogram seats. If they drop down back on the plane again, it's not designed for that. So I went through it with AI, and long story short, it said result major localized structural damage, aircraft almost certainly a write-off or a very long depot level repair. It's not going to be in a good state. Someone else, 36 C. Marty, says the exhaust from the ejection seat rocket motors would have made a mess of the cockpit, may have to be completely stripped out and everything replaced. Not a quick job, even if spares are available. And many others saying similar things. So actually, that plane, it's not just that you're going to lose 2 experienced pilots or crew members, a pilot and a navigator, but also you're likely to lose the plane for at least some considerable period. As War Translated eloquently put it, Russian aviation blogger Fighter Bomber reports briefly that at one of the occupiers' airfields, 2 pilots ended their contracts early by testing the roof of a shelter at high velocity with their own bodies. So that happened. In Konstantinivka, sad news here. There's a video, 2-minute video of some soldiers coming to the assistance of a man leaving his brother's funeral. The funeral was a man killed by a Russian drone, was himself struck by an FPV drone as he kind of leaves the funeral, which is horrible. This is what the Russians do. He suffered a broken leg and shrapnel wounds. Fighters from the Predator Brigade heard the blast and his cries, rushed in, gave first aid and evacuated him. Russian war crimes on civilians who are targeted go into the funeral of their own dead relatives. It's completely unacceptable, I would declare. I do declare. Then an interesting video here from Sky News going into the secret HQ of an Azov battalion. So they've had preferential access. I wonder if I can give you a sense of this by reloading it with audio, and we'll get a dip into this because I think it's worth a little look. If I can actually sort my self out. So share the screen. Let's get some sound on here.
And clearly, having it underground means that soldiers can't be found. When they leave the base, they actually take off their uniforms and come in civilian clothes. I've been allowed to show you around on what's happening inside. This is the entrance area where they've got cameras to watch out for people that might be coming down and check that everything's secure. In here, this is the area where they're fighting the war. And of course, you've got the planning room. It's for future plans. Obviously, I'm not going to take you inside, but from this location, the Azov Corps, which is made up of 5 brigades, they're fighting Russian attempts to push deeper into the Donbass. This is the core area, the operations center. We're not allowed to go in, but you can see soldiers inside looking at screens. They're watching footage from drones and other cameras, tracking movements on the ground and coordinating
using
their
the Delta
operations
system
to be able to counter the Russian attempts to advance. The unit here have managed to push back the Russians, but they were dealing with a storming attack only yesterday. Intelligence is key. Here, this is the information room. This room here is the intelligence center. And then this room is perhaps the most intriguing. It says classified information. You have to knock on the door. If you're told you can enter, then you can go in. I'm not going to try. Around the corner, this place is like a warren. It's huge. There are hundreds of soldiers who live and work here. You've got like a makeshift library where they can obviously relax. There's also a chessboard if they want to play a bit of chess. This room is really important. It's about electronics warfare and air defenses. We're allowed to look inside. Here, the soldiers are tracking threats from drones, from potential missiles, air defenses. Very, very key. Even though we're underground, there's clearly a concern. Here, we're not going to go in, but in that room there, that's where soldiers sleep. They work on shifts down here, and they literally spend their whole time underground. They sleep and work in the same area. Now, every soldier marches on his stomach. And here we have the canteen. You can see they're cooking up a stew. There's also a nice looking salad. And there's the laundry room is in there. In here, we have the kitchen where you've got chefs hard at work. Well, they were hard at work earlier, cooking up the food for the soldiers. And around this corner, it is the area where they eat. We've been told we're not allowed to go in there because there are soldiers here who work in intelligence and they don't want their faces shown. Now, this area here, journalists aren't normally allowed to come down here. We've been allowed access because the unit is going to be moving to another secret location in the next few days.
I presume that means that they have, lost ground and they're going to be moving backwards. I don't know if that's in the Pokrovsk area. It could be an indication that that the Ukrainian forces are moving backwards. Okay, so I just thought that would be an interesting sort of 3 minutes to look at there. Now, in terms of distant strikes last night, the Russians hit Ukraine with another 149 drones, of which 131 were intercepted. So that's a much better interception rate last night. Most were Shahed type drones. Hits were recorded in 11 locations. Debris fell in 4 more. And what we do know is that Sumy was one of the worst hit. We're going to just go to this bit of footage that I showed you yesterday in a military aid video. Go and check that out if you haven't already seen it. But this is a video of a Shahed. And what's significant about this, on the top left-hand side, you can see that as the interceptor hits it, there's a backward-facing camera. Now, obviously, it didn't help the Shahed here, but essentially, the drones that the Russians are sending into Ukraine are being adapted consistently to deal with attacks on them, and they appear to have not only sort of first-person view capabilities now, but they have the ability to see what's coming at them from behind. It could be that the Ukrainian drone, interceptor drone, was coming from a height more than directly from behind it, and that maybe didn't give a chance for the Russian crew operators to do evasive action there. But anyway, that's a slight worry for the Ukrainians as the Russian Shaheds are getting sort of more and more capable. Now, Dnipro saw explosions there last night. There were explosions in the city, after which a fire broke out on a residential building. Haven't heard too much more from Dnipro. We have heard from Okhturka in Sumy region, where 3 drones hit. One struck a residential building, injuring 7 civilians. Emergency crews are on site. In Chernihiv, another drone exploded near an apartment block there, injuring 3 more, one of whom was hospitalized. Firefighters are still on site. And actually, there's quite a lot more imagery coming out now. The worst Russian attack was probably in Sumy, where one of 3 Shaheds went straight into an apartment building, as already mentioned. Many residents suffered shock, while 7 have physical injuries. And there you can see the damage done to that building. Emergency services on site pronto to try and deal with that. Emergency workers have been on duty all night in Okhturka in Sumy, initially rescuing 35 people from the building, fighting fires, sifting through the rubble. An invincibility point has been set out for the residents to take shelter, charge devices, and get warm food and drinks. These are the kind of sheltered, I guess, I went in one in Kharkiv, and it was a size broadly of, I guess, a cargo, one of these containers, but it's made of brick, made of reinforced concrete and whatnot, so it can protect you certainly from shrapnel, and I don't know, it protects you from a direct hit from a missile, but if one hits nearby, you're somewhat safe and you can charge your devices in them and whatnot. The Kiev town of Fastiv was attacked. This is the one where the railway station was hit the other night, 3rd night in a row that's been targeted. Private residential building was struck and administrative buildings there. So quite a bit of damage done to Fastiv over the course of the last week. And then, we'll move on to what Ukraine were up to. Don't really know too much. Volgograd was targeted. Potential damage to come out from there, but we don't really know. I don't know if this has anything to do with strikes or whether it is an accident or some kind of undescribed incident, sabotage. Angarsk in Irkutsk region, an accident occurred at the combined heat and power plant number 9 in 1546 houses out of 1822 heated, so 546 houses. Heating has sharply decreased. The temperature in the apartments has dropped to 16 degrees, and the city and in the city itself, minus 19 degrees. I'm not sure I can make too much sense of those claims, but anyway, could well be that a combined heat and power plant was hit yesterday, or there might have been some I don't know, malfunction of the plants. Now, we talked about the dam in Kharkiv getting struck by missiles yesterday. Probable destruction of the Pechenhi dam will not have a critical impact on the front, says the General Staff. According to the 16th Army Corps, Pechenhi Dam in the Kharkiv region has been the object of systematic Russian attacks for a long time. In the case of the dam is damaged, backup routes have been developed. They've been actively used before and now fully allow for the necessary logistics. The Ukrainian Defense Forces are already trying to restore the crossing in the shortest possible time. So this isn't about the dam failing and flooding the entire area. They're worried more about the road that goes across the dam that has been taken out. In addition, Ukrainian units have accumulated the necessary supplies of material and technical means, so the temporary probable loss of the possibility of movement through the dam will not have a critical impact on the conduct of hostilities. And here we have the Kyiv Independent saying Ukraine braces for critical damage after Russian strike on Kharkiv Oblast dam threatens water supply. So this is now looking about the impact of, flooding or lack of water to certain areas, or too much water. Russia attacked the Pechenhi dam on the 7th, threatening the reservoir that supplies water to Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city. So that is something the Ukraine is going to be very much looking out. Going to be looking over to see what happens. Okay, and whether Russia strike there again. Now, going on to other bits and pieces, not a huge amount of data coming out from last night, all things considered. J&K Kyiv reports that the price of Russian oil hits a low not seen since the depths of the COVID crisis, with Urals grade trading at sub $43 a barrel. As you can see from the graph here, that is not looking good. It was down lower than that in COVID, obviously because no one wanted oil. The economy's ground to a halt around the world. People weren't moving. But now to getting towards that level, this is a real issue for the Russians, and that will starve the Russian economy of much needed income. The Russian economic hellscape, says Jay, again takes yet another turn for the worse, with gasoline prices. So petrol prices in Russia are now 8% higher than in the US. That is an absolutely crazy situation because Russia should have cheap as chips petrol, given it's supposed to be a country, gas station, or whatever the phrase was about the country, that it's some kind of, I don't know, gas station with an army or whatever it is they say. Now, bit of a challenge to the strength of the US here. We understand that, well, first of all, after publishing, as Tim White says, the racist and divisive US national security plan dictated by the Kremlin, the TACO president could today show his strength. The documents presented as the US self-interest, while Putin and China openly defy and humiliate Agent Orange and his sanctions. And this is in response to Russian LNG plant in the Baltics sends the first sanctioned gas to China. So a Russian liquefied natural gas export facility has delivered its first shipment to China since being sanctioned by the US in January, the latest sign of increased energy cooperation between Beijing and Moscow. The Valera vessel, which loaded a shipment from Gazprom PJSC's Portovaya facility on the Baltic Sea in October, arrived at the Beihai import terminal in southern China on Monday, according to Bloomberg. So this is a challenge for the US. Are they going to stand up strong to China, or are they just going to let this go? And if they do, then that's just open season for everyone, ignoring the sanctions. Bloomberg reports that Russia's liquefied natural gas export plant has delivered the first shipment to China since the sanctions were imposed. Another sign of that deepening energy cooperation. The Valera tanker docking at Beihai and offloading LNG. It's the 19th such delivery since August, is the claim from Euromaidan Press, as that particular tanker quietly delivers its thing. Of course, the sanctions properly came into effect on November the 21st. A number of dangerous encounters between drones and manned aircraft in Germany has risen by almost 40% year on year in the first 11 months of the year, NTV has reported, citing Deutsche Flugsicherung. DFS reported that 208 incidents of unmanned aircraft posing a hazard to aviation had been reported this year through November, up from 149 in the same period last year. The air traffic control provider added that incidents are recorded when unmanned aircraft come dangerously close to civilian planes. Nearly 3/4, 74% of drones were spotted near major airports. A sharp increase was observed at Germany's largest airport in Frankfurt, 45 drone sightings there compared to just 17 in the same period last year. Other airports with frequent sightings include Cologne, Bonn, Hamburg, that's 14 there, Hamburg 13, Munich, München 12. 8 incidents were recorded at Berlin airport. So really having to deal with a heightened prevalence of drones around significant airports. Don't know for sure who is behind those, but many fingers are pointing at the Russians. Now, going on to negotiations a little bit here to end the video. The analyst gives his tuppence on the new national security strategy that I think, as you've heard me say a number of times now, is an absolute disgrace. The US national security policy change is just sinking in and Europe is stunned. The Russians are hailing the policy as, quote, in alignment with our views. That should tell you all you need to know. The French ambassador said the section on Europe sounded like a right-wing pamphlet. The biggest part of the document states that Europe must take over all of European NATO's ground and air defenses by the end of 2027, a timeline nobody was prepared for. The Kremlin is cock-a-hoop. They have achieved what they have been trying to do for 60 years, separate the US from Europe. There's no question that if the regime could have withdrawn from NATO in full, it would have done. Ironically, Marco Rubio was a senator who made sure that can never happen without congressional approval. However, they're finding other ways to pull out without being too obvious, removing troops on rotation without replacement from Romania and without notice, selling equipment off to Poland to avoid shipping it home. There's plenty of discussion going on in Europe. The British seem to not entirely understand where they stand, and the entire UK security policy has been glued to America for 70 plus years, and the future of its nuclear deterrent, AUKUS, its F-35 buys, sub-based Tomahawks, the Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangements. How does all of that work when the elected government is told it's not suitable or right-wing enough, and its biggest future threat, the fascist Reform Party of Trump's bestie Farage, is their intended future partner, and they will actively support it? How do you respond to this? It undermines everything you and your country stand for. You now have a close ally who just told you you're nothing to them now. Do the Americans even realize what they've done? Someone here will ask the question, surely you don't mean us, but they do. They absolutely do. And it's time that for everyone in NATO, time to accept we're on our own politically, socially, economically, militarily, and now we have to stand up and defend ourselves in all those fields. America is coming for us. Wow, so it's a really damning approach there, analysis there from the analyst. Now, Steve Rosenberg from the BBC, still working in Moscow, says today's Russian papers are loving the new US national security strategy. One Russian paper on the implications for Europe says, quote, Trump isn't their daddy anymore. The Kremlin spokesman comments, quote, the adjustments in the updated strategy correspond in many ways to our vision. So the American national security strategy corresponds to Russia's vision of the world. Wow, there you go. It's not just me being anti-Trump. That is what the Russians are saying. The Witkoff plan made headlines for demanding Ukraine give up the Donbass, says Euromaidan Press. But less noticed is, and there's a bit of meat on the bones here, some of the details coming out, Washington would pocket half the reconstruction profits, hand Moscow a $200 billion investment vehicle, and stick Europe with a $100 billion bill. Using assets Europe froze. EU, you okay with this? Use them first. So, in other words, the Euromaidan Press imploring the EU to use their frozen Russian assets before the US and Russia get their hands on them. Now, Trump has come out and said on Fox, or at an event that Fox was covering, honestly, I'm a bit disappointed President Zelensky still hasn't read the peace plan. Okay, a bit of more detail on that in a second. So a reporter says, what's your next step in the Russia-Ukraine talks after last week's talks? Trump said, so we've been talking to Putin and to Ukrainian leaders, including Zelensky. And I have to say that I'm a little disappointed that President Zelensky hasn't read the proposal yet. That was a few hours ago. His people love it, but he doesn't. Russia is fine with it. Russia, would probably rather have the whole country if you think about it. But Russia, I think, agrees with it, but I'm not sure Zelensky agrees with it. His people love it, but he hasn't read it. Okay, some people are going nuts about this, and for good reason. So Trump is essentially trying to stick another dagger in Zelensky's back by saying he hasn't read the proposal yet, but the proposal's only just been written and discussed or whatever in the US between Huntov and Umarov, speaking to the Americans after they returned from Washington without going via Europe. So now the Ukrainians had to go to the US, sort it out with the Americans. The truth is they didn't actually want to telephone call this through to Zelensky due to the risk of wiretapping. So Zelensky has not yet seen the updated amendments to the peace plan. Due to the risk of wiretapping, Umarov will personally bring them from the US and explain the details of the negotiations. And bearing in mind, that's on the same, this is just after Budanov was asked whether they wiretapped the Russians. Ukraine's spy chief Kirill Budanov gives a blunt answer when asked about tapping top Kremlin officials. He said, we can, yes, that's what we get paid for. Comment gets, that comment comes after reports of a leaked conversation between Putin's close advisor and envoy. So Trump to then criticize Zelensky for not having spoken about this over the phone already, and to wait until he gets the detailed assessment of this from Umarov and Huntov in person is a bizarre criticism. But that's not the most worrying part. The worrying part is that he thinks Russia is fine with this, which is giving away the Donbass. And he says his people love it, but he doesn't. As in, really? The Ukrainians love it? The Ukrainians love what is undoubtedly going to be a capitulation to Russia. Trump is just fully on the side of Russia again now. And that's just where he is. He will never really be up for a just end to this war. He completely aligns himself with Russia. So Zelensky's confirmed that Umarov and Huntov are en route to Europe from the US, where they've been engaged in these back-channel talks. He expects a full briefing, especially on what the Americans conveyed from their Moscow contacts and which negotiation points the US is now willing to adjust, if any. We are already starting a new diplomatic week, said Zelensky. There will be consultations with European leaders. So he's meeting with Macron, Merz, and Starmer today in London, I believe. First of all, security issues, says Zelensky, support for our stability, support packages for our defense. First of all, air defense, long-term financing for Ukraine. Representatives of Ukraine have held substantive talks with representatives of the US. I expect detailed information from them about everything that was said in Moscow, about the nuances that the Americans are ready to modify in negotiations with us, with the Russians. Yesterday, we spoke with Stephen Witkov and Jared Kushner. I thank you for your willingness to work together 24/7. Some things can only be discussed in person. Umarov and Huntov will report to me, and I will speak with European leaders. We have meetings planned in London as well as in Brussels. There's a bit of a retort there to Trump, I guess. No agreement on the Donbass yet is the latest we hear. Zelensky says as he visits London to discuss US-led peace efforts with European leaders. The Kyiv Independent reports, quote, there are visions of the US, Russia, and Ukraine, and we don't have a unified view on Donbass, Zelensky told Bloomberg regarding the discussions on the peace plan for Ukraine. And that's pretty much where we are. Just seeing if there's anything else. Zelensky was given a warm welcome into Downing Street by the UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. We have, Macron there as well, with Starmer and Merz too. So they are all meeting. Zelensky met at the airport here in the UK. He's got, that's Zelensky, Valery Zelensky. Not the warmest of greetings. That's quite perfunctory, wasn't it? I don't know, but that Zelensky is going to be his replacement after the end. Pretty clear to me. So that's where we are. I don't know that Oh, there's a bit more information coming out on strikes last night. So this is good that I finally got there. A number of enemy facilities were hit, says the General Staff. Sorry, you didn't see any of that. You've got Macron and Merz and Starmer. It's because I've got the sound turned on to this. Meeting here with, I guess, British ambassador, British dignitary. Then you got Valery Zelenskyy, and then meeting with what looks like, is that Royal Navy? I can't see the sign on top there, or is it Ukrainian Navy? Could be. Anyway, this is what I wanted to show you. So General Staff saying that there were a number of enemy facilities hit last night by the Ukrainians. Luhansk region in the Chmyrivka area, an ammunition depot was hit. In the area of temporarily occupied Donetsk, a drone depot of the Russian occupiers was hit. So that's going to be super useful. A fuel depot of the enemy was hit in the Semeykoye area in Luhansk again. A mobile fire group and a Pantsir S-1 anti-aircraft missile system were hit in Donetsk. Wow. And the results of the hit from December the 5th by strike drones of the Temryuk seaport. That was confirmed by the General Staff as well. Destruction of 20 tanks, which is 70% of the total, has been confirmed. In addition, the fire continues on the liquefied gas loading platform, where about 24 railway tanks are located. As of the evening of December the 7th, the total area of the fire was almost 1,000 square meters. So that is 20 tanks. That is sounds to me to be gas tanks that are at the Temryuk port. So it looks like that was a massive bit of damage done to Temryuk port there on the Black Sea coast, or is it the Azov Sea coast? So there you go. That has happened. I'm not sure if there's anything else. No, the rest will be for further videos. So anyway, that's enough from me today. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate your support. Don't forget, if you haven't already, we are running a oh no, we aren't. It's I don't know why that's struggling. The jigger's poor. Looks like that's in a bit of trouble. Could be a cyber attack or something. I'll get onto them. But if you, at some point today, if you can go to the link atpgeo.com/donate, you'll be taken to the fundraiser we're doing. And also, if you go to atpgeo.com/petition, you'll get to Mark's petition to get UK forces positioned in the west of Ukraine. So I'll be talking about that lots over the next few weeks to try and drum up support for that. Please share it, please sign it, and that'd be absolutely fantastic. So it should be atpgeo.com/petition. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.